Ooh.
There we are. We're live. What's up?
Woo!
So
Hi.
it's good to see you. So
Yeah, good to see you.
I said let's go live because we were talking about olives, and so you were saying Kalamata's your favorite. What else? Dude,
Mhm.
I like the green ones too.
Yeah. Honestly, I like all olives. So sometimes there's a place in town here that has an olive that you can get with almonds in it, and I love that too, just because it has a little crunch to it. But
So almonds inside the olive.
yeah, it's so
Get
good.
out of here.
It's so good. Yeah, if you like almonds, it's like perfect since it has a little bit of a crunch.
Yeah, that's good. So we've got a grocery store called Wegmans. It's like super popular grocery store in the Northeast. And Danny Wegman is the owner of the grocery store. And they've got a whole olive bar in there, and it's got like a Danny's favorite, and it's delicious. So it's like basically three different kinds of olives, mozzarella cheese, like the cheese
Ooh.
balls, and then in like a crushed red pepper, spicy, like broth almost. Oh,
Uh,
delicious.
I love when you can go to like those little like olive bars and literally pick out whatever ones you want to take with you.
Yes, those are the best. Wait, so you were saying I didn't even know this about you. You lived in Spain?
Yeah,
That's
so
when you fell in love
I
with
studied.
olives?
Yeah, well, I liked olives before, but I didn't realize how much I like different types of olives. So my bachelor's is in elementary ed in Spanish. So I studied abroad in Avila, Spain, which is like an hour from Madrid. So yeah, it was a good
So
time. It was
yeah,
fun.
that's cool. So wait, so what are you fluent in Spanish? Can you speak Spanish well? Like could you go to Spain and just get by yourself?
I could get by. When I went there though, I'll tell you, I got there thinking, I have done high school Spanish, I've done college Spanish. I think I'd done 3 years of college Spanish at that point. And so I had 7 years of Spanish. And I was like, I totally have this under control. I'm gonna go to Spain, I'm gonna know what's happening. And I got there and I stayed with a host family for a while. And I remember sitting at the dinner table and being like, I don't know anything they're saying. I have no idea what they're talking about. And I'm like nodding my head, and I'm sure they can just see like the glossed over eyes, no idea what's happening. Eventually, I started to realize that like I understood what they were saying, but the dialect was a little bit different. When you hear it spoken in a way that's like normal, opposed to when you're really slowing things down in a classroom, it's drastically different. And so eventually I was able to catch on, and I was able to ask questions and go wherever, and I got by just fine. It was kind of funny because we had traveled to Ireland actually while I lived in Spain. And when we were in Ireland, we had met some people from all over in like the European countries, and our only common language that we could all speak, where we could like talk together, was Spanish. So we ended up all speaking in Spanish, even though in Ireland they speak English. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
it was a good experience. It's definitely one of those things where I wish I had somebody to practice with more, just so I could use it more frequently, because it's something when you use it, you retain it so much better. And that's with anything, right?
Sure.
But I hope someday when I have kids, I will teach my kids to speak Spanish.
What made you interested in it to the point where you wanted to study it that much? Like I always struggle with foreign. I took French in high school and I wasn't good at it, so I never really had any interest in going over there.
Yeah, so I'd say like first and foremost, like everything, it was my teacher. So my freshman year Spanish teacher. Honestly, the most that I ever learned in Spanish was from my freshman and sophomore year, where I had the same Spanish teacher. And that's kind of what got me like really loving Spanish. She'd say, "Oh, you have such a beautiful accent. You need to keep practicing." And I was really motivated to keep going just because it came more naturally, and I enjoy practicing it. Kind of like music, you enjoy practicing music and learning, different songs. I enjoyed Spanish that same way, so I decided to also get a bachelor's in it, because I was like, maybe I'll teach high school Spanish.
Yeah. What did she do? Like that made you love it? That's cool. I mean, I always think it's great when, we fall in love with something because a teacher pushed us in that direction. Do you remember any specifics? I mean, she complimented you, obviously. That's one thing.
She was from Panama, and she is just one of those people that was very, very firm, had very high expectations for all students. When you came to that class, you had to be prepared, but she did it in a way that was endearing. So it was never in a way to make you embarrassed or feel uncomfortable, but she called on people and she called people out. And it was very lighthearted and funny, but you still were held accountable because you had to be practicing in her class. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do what you're doing. The other thing that I really liked about her class versus other Spanish classes that I took, in other Spanish courses that I took, it was a lot more like tests that I would take or reading that I would do or whatever. She would give us like just random situations and we would have to communicate with her in Spanish. And that's what we were graded on, is how we communicated. And I felt like the real life application of how she taught was so much more valuable in actually learning the language and being quicker on your feet and being able to implement it than anything else.
Yeah.
I'd also, there's like a fly.
That's true. That's true though. You agree? Like that's true with everything. I mean, that way of teaching, right? Of utilizing real life examples and real life, just, you know, to me, that's the best way to learn in anything.
And she was one of those where I feel like sometimes, and I think we do this with kids in so many different ways. I actually have a story about that from today. But I think what we do for a lot of people is we think we have to teach things at a slower rate than we actually do. So like sometimes you take a Spanish class, for example, and they're talking to you like you're a 3-year-old child in Spanish, right? Except we are 20 years old learning Spanish. So you can talk to us at a quicker rate because we're going to retain things and learn things in a different way. And so it's kind of similar. I have a little buddy who's in daycare right now because we don't have summer school until August. So I have a little buddy that's in daycare, like really close to getting kicked out, having behaviors at the daycare.
Wait, are you working? Are you working at a daycare right now?
No, I'm not working at a daycare. I just had known that I had been in contact with the daycare and his mom and such. And so they had said he's really close.
Wait. So even, hold on. So even on your summer break, you're just in touch with the daycare to find out about,
I guess
is this one of your students normally though during the year?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Like, shout out to you. No, that's really great. Like, but it just shows the dedication that you have to the kids and the relationships that you've built. It's not, you know, one and done. It's, you know, summer break, but I'm still in your life. You know?
It's funny too, because we've been out of school for probably 2 weeks now. And I wish you should have seen me this morning. I was so excited to get to see this student. I had been like counting down the hours. I was ready. The time hit where I was like supposed to go over there and I'm like, here we go. I was so excited. But it's interesting because this is a little buddy who is not necessarily nonverbal, but doesn't communicate in the same way that you and I would. However, understands what his peers would, right? And so anyways, a lot of times what happens is that because they don't communicate the same way as their peers, we treat them like they're way lower functioning. And sometimes that's actually to the detriment of the student. And I think that's with anything. It's like saying, oh, because this kid has meltdowns, I'm going to hold them to a lower standard than I am their peers. And that never works. And so this is a little buddy that they had, you know, just kind of been holding to a lower standard because they're like, oh, he can't do those things. He won't be able to listen. We're going to have to make picture cards and this and that. And I said, no, he should be doing everything that his peers are doing. And if he's not, you need to make him
so,
because he can.
So what does that mean when you say he doesn't communicate like you or I? Like, what do you mean by that? Like, what's that specifically look like?
I would say a lot more like shorter fragments of sentences. So like 1 to 2 word sentences, a lot more like labeling. So like bathroom, water, this, that. I want bathroom. So we always work on like increasing the language. However, if I were to say, hey, can you pick up that water bottle? Hey, can you bring me this? He'd be able to do it like that, you know? So he can process way more than he's actually able to get out and communicate. However, he still is able to communicate his needs. So, you know, if he has to go to the bathroom, he'll say bathroom. He'll say bathroom. I'll say, what do you need? And he'll pause and he'll go, I want bathroom, you know? So it's one of those things that we slowly teach skills as he adapts. But he's a kid. And I've said this, I was just talking to one of my peer teachers that I have at my school. And I said, his success will be dependent on how people treat him. So if people hold him to a high standard and they treat him like his peers, he will be much more successful and learn so much more than if they put him on this really low totem pole where they're like, we're going to treat you like a 3-year-old because your language isn't where it should be with other peers.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we do that a lot with kids is we say, they're not going to be able to do that before we even know what they can do when they
I
have
know. I feel like it's kind of a double-edged sword though, too, a little bit, because, there's also, so like, I think it's easy, like hearing you say that, I think it's easy to then kind of draw a conclusion that, you're anti-self-contained or against special ed because, right, is that holding a kid to a lower standard? Like, do you see it that way?
No, not at all.
Me either, right.
Yeah,
but do you see how some people could? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, in a sense. I would say, yeah, as you know, as any special ed teacher, like knows being in the field, there is a fly flying around my face and it is driving.
You know what's funny is I can't see it. So all I see you doing is this.
My hands.
Yeah. But
I look like I'm spazzing out over here. But I think for anybody that is a special ed teacher, we know that the only reason that these kids are on an IEP or have an IEP is that we want to provide them the supports that they need to be as successful as possible. And sometimes those modifications and accommodations aren't able to be made independently with just a general ed teacher. Sometimes because the academic gap or the behavioral gap is just a little bit too much that they need a few more supports. However, in my opinion, I think those kids should still be held to the same standard. Obviously, there's loopholes and there's different things that happen where it's not always the same, but
yeah. Well, I mean, yes, I agree. But I think you also have to always be adjusting based on what a kid can and can't do. Yep. You know what I mean? Like, one of my issues with the phrase, I think sometimes, administrators walk around school and they tell teachers that they should always have high expectations for kids. And I hear that all the time. And I agree for the most part, but I think sometimes that almost gets in the way because, if you expect a blind person to read the board, you're going to piss them off every time because they literally can't do it. They can't do it. And so sometimes I think what happens is under the guise of high expectations, we give kids things that they literally can't do. And I think when we do that, it's easy then for kids to give up and quit. Follow what I'm saying? So I think my point is, I think people in general have to be very careful, with what we're giving kids, paying close attention to making sure they can actually complete what we're giving them.
That'd be like having a fifth grader completing work at like a second grade math level and being like, well, he needs to be held to the same expectations as everybody else. So he should be doing this triple by triple multiplication problem. Why isn't he doing it? I'm holding him to a high expectation. So no, I totally get that. I think it's just dependent on the student. But and like you said, you just kind of adapt with the student. So that student, they might not be at a fifth grade level, but hey, if they were completing single digit by single digit multiplication last week, you better believe you should be able to add 2 more on, or you better believe that you can now start regrouping or whatever it might be. Just kind of adapting with the student.
Always going to the next level. So did you see him today? Did you see the kid?
I did. I did. And so it's funny because this is a kiddo that I've had him since he came to kindergarten, and it's just kind of funny because his progress, like how much he has grown as a student, is just unreal. Like it blows my mind.
Like where was he? From where to where? Like where did he start?
So he's probably one of my only kids that's ever qualified to have 2 paras with him.
Wow.
At once, just due to elopement and behavioral needs and whatever else, so I think there probably wasn't a ton of structure before kindergarten. And so just like basic things like not standing on tables, not peeing in garbage cans, not doing this, like it was just, we kind of had to start from square one.
Yeah.
Maybe before square one. I'm not really sure.
So yeah, that's before. So he was standing on tables and peeing in garbage cans in school.
Yes. and so many more things. And just like little things, like we'd notice spitting and hitting and whatever else it would be. And it was a lot of structure. There were times where I'm like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get through to this kid, because I feel like we are doing the same thing every day and we are not getting anywhere. Right. Yeah. And eventually just being consistent really worked for this kid. And now this is a kid that is reading sight words and knows all of his letters and all of his sounds and is doing math in the class. He's in the classroom almost all day. And it's funny now because if he sees me he would not have any of the behaviors that this daycare is struggling with. Like, he sees me and he knows that if that happens, there's going to be a consequence. And it's not a crazy consequence. I just have him sit in timeout. That's what worked. You know, there's different consequences for everyone. I am not a big believer in timeout. That's never one of my like go-to consequences, but there's certain kids that is the only thing that makes sense to them. Like, that's the only way where they can actually kind of learn from their actions. And that was something where he was like, oh, okay, that was not a good choice. And so it was essentially just going in, and I got to see him, and I was so excited. I'm like, look how cute he is. I think he's already grown. It's only been 2 weeks. And then I got
but you started by saying that his behavior's been to the point where he's almost gotten kicked out. So like what, right? So like what, you know, how do we then, and I've had that question from teachers a lot, like, okay, I'm leaving the kid or I'm not with the kid. How do I then help them continue on their progress? Or you saw so much progress with him, and then here he goes to where he is now. And it's like, you know, it's kind of like that roller coaster where he did well for a while, and now it seems like he's on the down slope.
I wish I had a perfect answer for this, because in a perfect world, my answer would be to have that behavior plan go with him wherever he goes. Like, you bring that behavior plan to daycare, you bring it wherever. I've actually been in the home with this kid to help the mom with behaviors, and that's been super successful. He's a kid, and it varies from kid to kid. Some kids, they learn at school the expectation, and they will take it home, and that's what they'll do. They'll do it at daycare because they've now learned it. But then you have those kids that have to relearn it in every setting that they're in, right? Every teacher, they have to relearn the expectation. They have to relearn whatever the routine is. And he's a kid that's like that. So he totally has it down in school, totally has it down at home. But then once again, a new setting, he kind of starts from square one. Whereas as soon as you start implementing that behavior plan, and that's essentially what I did, is I went in and I explained what we do at school, which would be in his behavior plan.
Which is what? So what is that? What specifically do you tell him?
It's not, so he's a kid that when he has a behavior, he's looking for a reaction. So he's not doing it to be mean, but he's doing it to have a reaction. So he's one of those kids that hits or kicks or spits on other kids. And then when they notice, he'll go, like he'll kind of laugh, which is really irritating for kids. And it's kind of irritating for adults. I think it makes adults mad. Not fully understanding that he's hurting other people's feelings, right? And so with kids that are, depending on where they're at, he's a kid that where he's at, the most appropriate way to address it is just saying, hey, no spitting, time out. That's what we do. No hitting, time out. Sometimes I think we get so mad, we're like, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. You know better than that. And it's like so many words that they're not even understanding what you're saying. They're not actually hearing what you want from them, right? And so it was just kind of modeling that and setting that up in the classroom so they knew how do you
move though? Like how do you move from that like to the next phase? Because I think the ultimate goal for kids is to try to get them at least at some point to start to take responsibility for their own selves, you know what I mean? For their own behavior and their own actions. And, you know, I think that's a good start. Like, I think the start is to be firm and, you know, kind of direct. But I think there also has to be sort of like that next phase of, you know, getting a kid to really start to really think through what they're doing and, you know, working on things before they do it. Like I remember saying to multiple kids, like you just said, biting, kicking, punching, hitting, spitting, that's not the problem, right? That's the solution kids are choosing to their problems. And so like the real problem is, you know, anger or frustration or annoyance, or like you said, right, an inability to communicate. All of those things are the problem, right? And then the solution is because I feel frustrated, because I feel aggravated, let me bite, kick, punch, spit, and hit. And I think it's so important to explain to kids that, you know, anger, frustration, annoyance are going to be part of your life forever, right? They're part of my life. I used to say that to kids all the time. I would say, you know, after a kid kind of calmed down from a meltdown or a flip out, I would say, you know, what's really interesting is you and I are similar. we're really similar. And they would say, well, how are we similar, Mr. Mendler? You're a teacher and I'm a kid. And I would say, I know, but you get upset sometimes, right? And they would say, yeah, me too. You get aggravated, right? Yeah, so do I. You ever say stuff where it kind of comes out of your mouth and you're like, man, I wish I could take that back real quick. And you can't, right? It's like the tube of toothpaste. It comes out. There's toothpaste companies are smart. You can't put it back in. And you're like, and sometimes my words are like that. And same for you, right? Yeah, I'm kind of, right? See how similar we are? The only difference between you and me is, when I get frustrated and I get annoyed and I get aggravated, I don't bite, kick, punch, spit, and hit. Here's what I choose to do instead with my aggravation. And I think it's just critical that well, I think two things. Number one, I think anytime we tell a kid to stop doing something, it's important to replace the thing that we're telling them to stop with something else. Like it's not okay enough to say no hitting, because hitting's not the problem. It's the solution to anger. So great, you're telling me not to hit, but I'm still going to get angry sometimes. What do I do instead? And I think, literally sometimes creating lessons and practicing those scenarios with kids can be incredibly powerful, so that when the actual, thing happens, they've been through it and they kind of know, here's how I'm going to handle myself the next time I feel this way, because feeling that way will be part of your life forever,
Yeah. And I think it's entirely dependent on the student. I think those kind of conversations are really, really great with your kiddos that are emotionally, have the label of ED or EBD. But for this specific kiddo, that type of conversation would mean nothing.
No chance. Right.
There would be no chance. And that's where you kind of implement like pictures, and you try to start showing what maybe other people are feeling. He's just one of those kids that I can't wait to see where he's at in like 3rd or 4th grade. But this is a situation though on how we taught a different strategy. So this specific kid had learned that at home that there's other siblings in the home, that the siblings are younger, and so the mom would give more attention to the siblings. And when he wanted attention from the mom, he would spit. He had learned that by spitting, the mom would then hug him because she would kind of cover his face, and then he'd get that attention, right? But I didn't know that. I had just seen spitting and spitting and spitting, and I'm like, man, I don't know what's happening.
I hate
but
spitting.
The crazy part was once we had conferences, and his mom had come into the school, and his mom, in the presence of his mom, I noticed that the spitting picked up way more.
Interesting.
Way more. And then she hugged him, and then it stopped. It extinguished the behavior. Well, we started to have issues on the bus where right when he would get off the bus, right when he was waiting for mom, he would start spitting again. And it finally dawned on me that the function of his behavior was to get the attention, the hug from his mom that he wanted, but he was using spitting to get what he wanted. And so we eventually would say no spitting, and we prompted him to say, I want hug. Instead. And that's kind of how we transitioned out of it. So that's like a different way to teach a strategy for a kid that maybe can't even communicate those types of things, right?
So you actually spent, so just to kind of break this down for people. So you go into this and you're like, okay, the real problem is he wants to be hugged, right? That's the real problem. The real problem is a long
way to figure that out, but we did get that eventually.
Yeah, but it fits because it's that concept of attention. Attention is such a powerful thing in connection, right? Those two things, and that need that so many people have. And I always say, one of the things I say in my workshops is attention is like water. Water is something in our life that you have to have. If you don't have it, you're going to take it. And if you don't take it, you're going to die. Now, the reality is you don't have to see me drink water. Like, right. I'm not drinking it right now. You don't have to see me, but that in my life at some point I do. And, but a lot of our kids that we're talking about, they don't get it anywhere in their life, right? So they don't get any attention anywhere. And so then they come to school, and they're needy. They're so needy for it. And, and the thing is, like, if you came in and you were dying of dehydration and you were super thirsty, and I came up to you and I was like, well, here's 2 different cups. You can pick which one you want, right? And you open cup number 1 and there's nothing in it, right? It's empty. You'd be like, oh man, dang. And then I give you cup number 2 and you kind of swish around. You're like, well, at least there's something in there. And then you open it and you're like, oh, it's nasty, contaminated, disgusting, poisonous water. I guarantee you're still going to drink it because bad water is better than no water. If you're dying of hydration. And I think for a lot of kids, the concept of bad attention is better than no attention, right? Knock it off, cut it out. Enough is enough. Stop. How many more times need to be told? Attention, 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 attention. So the kid has learned, how do I, in your case, right? How do I get noticed by my mom? How do I get that affection that I'm looking for from my mom? Let me be inappropriate, because every time I do, she feeds that. And that's why I think, and I love the name of our show, because, you know, I think looking beyond the behavior in this case is exactly what you did, and really kind of pinpointing what the issue is. And then that next step of really sitting with the kid and teaching him how to ask for what he really wanted, right? Which is yay, because right now he gets what he wants. So you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to spit, because you can get that hug just by asking for it. Whoa, what an amazing concept.
And it starts so simple, right? So when you're trying to teach kids that their language has power, you want to honor whatever request it is. And I feel like that's like such a tough concept. So for a lot of my kids that aren't necessarily talking, or let's say maybe they are talking, but when they're frustrated, they can't communicate what they need. They have communication cards, and it'll say like, I want a break. I want this. I need this, whatever it might be. And so, but what we do then, if that kid asks for a break 15 times in a day, you better believe we would honor that, because we want to show him that his words have power, right? By using his words and communicating rather than hitting someone, he gets what he wants over that. Yeah. So this specific kid, another funny story is we had taught him that using the language I want would get him what he wanted. So he would say like, I want apple juice. And you better believe I always had apple juice ready, because that was one of his favorite things. So I'm like, sure, you can have apple juice. Well, it got to the point where I wouldn't always have what he would want. So he'd be like, I want pancakes. And I'm like, I don't have pancakes, you know, I don't have time to go make those. So it's just kind of funny that he had kind of correlated that. But the cool part is this is a kid that we take time to have a lot of social interaction. And so sometimes when I'm being like interacting with him, I get really silly. So I'll tickle him and we'll play like hide and seek, just those extra little things. And I'll be like, you're being silly. Are you silly? I'd always say, are you silly? And then one day we're working on something. I think we're working on like Edmark reading. It's a reading program that we have, and we're sitting at the table and we're working on it. And he looks at me and he goes, I want silly. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know? So then that showed me that that's what he cares about, is he cares about that tickling and that attention and that goofiness, which showed me that's a whole way that we can motivate this kid to do things. And he communicated that, right? He showed me what he needed, which was really neat.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's interesting. And I think the next, again, the next phase is going from I want to can I please have, right? It's like adding in, you go from I want to, starting to work on manners and teaching, here's your foundation, right? Your foundation, sort of like in writing, your foundation is a subject and a verb, but now we can make it better by adding in adjectives and adverbs. And same here, right? You're learning how to communicate, but now we can actually make your communication better by using words like please and thank you and making eye contact and teaching sort of all the peripheral skills that go along with communicating.
I will say though, one thing that's hard, and I'm even trying like now, because that is our next step looking into next year and the years after, is it helping with that like thank you and please. And this is a kid that has great manners, because once he learns something, he always uses it. So he says thank you and please and whatever. But I think he does it automatically and not necessarily knowing what it is, so that's a hard thing for everybody, is explaining that like abstract concept that we say something because it's polite, what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So almost just talking about like we say please because it makes people happy, when you use please, it means you're nice, you're being happy, but that's a hard concept to teach.
It is. And I it's interesting because, you often speak from the perspective of little kids, right? But I taught primarily older kids, and I think I told you about him the one time, my former student Angel, who, the one day that, I would challenge him, right? So I would say something to him like, listen, man, everybody in the class knows that you can get us all riled up, right? We've all seen that like 400 times, I wonder if you have it in you to get everybody calm, after lunch, and so one day he comes in and he forgets, you know, and I make eye contact with him and he remembers that he's supposed to get everybody quiet, right? And so at the top of his lungs, he screams, top of his lungs, yo, shut the F up, right? Top of his lungs. So I'm like, whoa, right? I mean, and there was like, you know, 25 kids in the class. So I'm like, wait, come here. He's like, what? I said, good job. But listen. Tomorrow when you do it, just leave the F-bomb out. So just yell, yo, shut up. So the next day he's like, yo, shut up, right? Then like a week later it was, yo, please shut up. Then like by the next week it was, yo, please shut up. Thank you. Then it was, yo, please be quiet. And it took us like, I don't even know, 3 months to teach him how to tell everybody in the class to be quiet appropriately. But it was hilarious when he did it the first time because, you know, that's the thing about asking kids to help you do stuff, you know, that you want to do. Like they can do stuff. Like, I mean, if I stand in the middle of the classroom and scream, shut the F up, I think I'm going to get fired. Right. But he does it and they all listen. Right. I'm like, all right, I know. It was funny. But, you know, that was what it was, though, with that kid. It was just look, he was a kid who just didn't learn. You know, I mean, it's amazing when I think about the amount of hours that my wife and I spend just with our kids working on, you know, on a daily basis, just when they communicate with us, like, Dad, get me milk. No, why don't you try asking that again? Oh, Dad, can I please have milk? And when you think about how many kids don't ever get that, right? And not only don't they ever get that, but they see the opposite of that, right? They're living in a world where people are shouting at each other and screaming at each other and calling each other names and, you know, bossing each other around. And so I think sometimes with certain kids, you have to actually undo what's been done and then rebuild, right? It's one thing to sort of like buy a vacant, you know, lot and build your property. It's another thing to have to knock down what's there and then rebuild from the ground up. Like it's a whole other thing that you have to do. And it's, you know, it's work. And I think the biggest sort of pushback that I hear sometimes from teachers on that is that they don't have time, right? It takes a lot of time. And I think the way to view that is as an investment, you know, it's an investment. It's sort of like the thought process is, you know, I got 3 kids, I have a wife, I've got bills up to, you know what, like every dollar that comes in, I could spend. I could, but I still take a little bit and put it away with the thought being 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, it's going to be worth a lot more. And I think the same concept holds true with a lot of our kids. It's like putting in that work now and teaching them those skills now will really benefit us 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months down the line. But I think sometimes it's hard to see that far away. You know what I mean?
I just think about all the kids that have these home lives where they don't ever see respect given or they don't ever see a positive interaction between parents or siblings or whatever else. And then I see them in school and sometimes they are the kind kids and the polite kids. And I wish more people recognize just how truly amazing that is, because that is a gift. The fact that they are such beautiful, kind humans despite their home lives is just so miraculous. I had a student this last year that really didn't ever call teachers by like Mr. or Miss anything, like just hadn't ever saw that as a sign of respect. And
right. So what do you call them by their name, like their first name?
Yeah. So I'd be like Chyna, and I go by Miss Chyna, you know. So I'd be like, hey, buddy. I said, I know that you respect me, but just remember that that's a sign of respect. That's why we use it at school. And a lot of times he wouldn't use it, whatever, but you better believe one day a kid walked into my classroom, same age as him, right? And these are 5th graders, and says, hey, Chyna. And that kid was like, it's a sign of respect. You need to say Miss Chyna. You know, where it's almost like they still respect you enough to stand up for you, but sometimes it just doesn't always come out in those ways. So you kind of pick your battles. You know, it wasn't something I always talked about. Right. I knew deep down that he respected me. He listened to me. We had deep conversations. And it's just one of those things where sometimes you do pick your battles. It's not always going to be a perfect world.
Agreed. I think that's, you know, that concept of getting kids on your side, you know, you get them on your side. And once you get them on your side, look, it doesn't mean they're always going to be hey for you 24/7, but it does mean they're usually going to stick up for you. And I love that. You know, I tell to people all the time, like when I was a kid in school, if you got me on your side in your class, you would never again have to ask your class to be quiet. because I would walk in and tell everyone to shut the F up for you. I would. I'd be like, yo, shut up, man. That lady's trying to teach. Wait till next period. We hate that dude. And like, that's literally, I think, what some kids do. It's sort of like, you know, and I think you see it though in a lot of schools, right? You see, you know, this concept of certain kids who behave for one person, but they don't for someone else, especially in middle school and high school, you see that because kids switch classes so much. But I think you also see it in elementary school where with certain people, the kid acts one way and then with another person, they act. And I think the thought process really should be more of what's this one doing that this one isn't doing, you know? And but
I've been said a lot of times people will say, well, you're just the fun one. You're the one that they just, and that is not the case. So you ask my students, they do work. They are held to a high standard. And I think sometimes it's hard to think about the fact that maybe the way we interact with students isn't working for that student and that it's okay to have to change things. Doesn't always mean that all we do is fun things and it's not always butterflies and rainbows, but it's interesting that sometimes people's defense mechanism is just, you're the fun one. That's why they like you. All you do is fun things with that.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing though. Like it doesn't have to be that you're the fun one. It has to be that you're willing to be the fun one. Right? Yeah. Like if you're willing to be the fun one, you don't always have to be the fun one because the kids know, well, sometimes he's really fun, but other times he's not. Like other times he's serious. It's sort of like that concept of, you know, I always say, I have a title for like my next book. I'm going to call it Cool Jerk. Because I think the best teachers are the coolest jerks. And if you're always cool with kids, they'll walk all over you. It's kind of like being the same thing as a parent, right? If you're always cool with your kid, they'll walk all over you. But if you're always a jerk, they'll hate you. So you kind of got to be a cool jerk, right? And when you can balance being both, I think kids see that level of, you know, and the other thing I think that happens is they'll respect you when you're not having a good day a lot more. So like, I know there were times, you know, where I would come in and whatever, like every once in a while, you know, something happens the night before, I'm in a bad mood. And I would just sometimes look at the kids and say, just not today. Like, not today, you guys. Like, I'm not in the mood to mess around today. And to like, you know, and kind of usually they would look at me and say, all right, you know, or at least a couple of them would say, all right, yeah, stop. Like he's just not in the mood. But I feel like if you're always that way, right? If you're always that way, then you're kind of like, well, what fun is it coming to this class? You know? Yeah. So I think that balance is really good. And the other thing I think, you know, I was really lucky early in my career because I did inclusion and self-contained. And, you know, when you do inclusion, you get to watch a lot of teachers teach, right? So like literally I would go with certain kids. I would be in sometimes 4 regular ed classrooms in a day, right? With the same kids. So we would go first period to this class, second period to this class. And, you know, it was amazing to watch what would happen because look, you know, I think every teacher, I've never met a teacher who, like, when you ask them privately, have you tried to build relationships with kids? I've never heard one say no. I think every teacher tries. Okay, so I want to make that clear. But then when you watch, right, and you see the difference, right? So, like, for example, I would go in these rooms and every teacher on a Monday, every one of them would say, all the 4 that I worked with would say, how was your weekend? Every single one, right? And then the kids would answer the same every time. Fine, boring, stupid, dumb, good, right? 1-word answers. Teacher number 1 would go like this. Great. Turn to page 25 right now. Open your book. Teacher number 2 would say, boring. Well, what'd you do? Oh, you did? Who were you with? Oh, no way. How'd you get there? Oh, really? What'd you have to eat? Oh, I didn't know you liked that. What'd you put on it? Ketchup or hot sauce? You did? I've never even been there. And then like 20 minutes later, they'd be like, oh my gosh, you guys, we have to stop talking about last weekend. We have to get some math done. See the difference? Like what certain ones would, how was your weekend? Good, great, open to page 25. Other one, how was your weekend? Good. Well, tell me more. And they would dive in like head first into the kid's life. And, you know, when I would watch that, so I would often be standing in the back watching this saying, look at what this one's doing. And you know, I think sometimes teachers, it's easy to become afraid of that, right? It's sort of like, well, especially when you're newer, how much time can I take, right? From what if my administrator walks in, and they see me having these conversations with kids, and I'm supposed to be teaching Shakespeare, or I'm supposed to be teaching, 3 x 3. But my administrator walks in and I'm talking to them about, where they went with their friends over the weekend and who drove them and how they got there. And, I don't want to get in trouble. And I think it's easy sometimes for people to get caught up in that. And I was lucky early in my career because watching these really good teachers do that gave me so much confidence. And I would just sit back and be like, man, like for this teacher, these kids will run through a brick wall. Like they would never dream of being late to her class. But over here, they could care less about getting there on time. And that was always what the difference was. It was every time I would watch and kind of dissect, what's this one doing versus that one? It was always that extra level of questions and connection and, caring and showing the kid that, that the teacher cares way more about them than they do about anything they're trying to teach them. And I think for some kids, like they have to know, I care more about you than I do about anything I'm trying to teach you. And once I know that as a kid, you'll be able to teach me anything you want. But some of us haven't done that work to show the kid that we care that much, and I think that's often the tipping point in certain classrooms. And I think, it's so important for teachers to have the confidence to do that. Like they don't teach you this in teacher school. Right? Like in teacher school, you don't go through teacher school. I mean, we learn about behavior modification, we learn about tickets and stickers and all that's the consequences, but we don't learn about going above and beyond and, never being afraid to sometimes spend maybe an extra 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Maybe sometimes it's like 20 minutes where you just end up talking about whatever, right? Whatever's going on and relating your own life, right? Oh, I like that too. Oh, I remember when I was a kid and what we did, when I was with my friends and when we first started driving and you start sharing these stories and it's just, you see this connection start to form. And once that connection starts to form, it's game over, right? Because now you've got that kid hooked. And once they're hooked, then you can reel them in. But you got to hook them first. And it was, I loved watching it. Like I loved watching some people just go to that level. And it always, I do, one of the things I do in my seminar, I don't know if I did this when you were there. I don't think I did, but I do a 4-question quiz. So I love this. It's basically, I do it usually either before the first break or before lunch. And I say to them, we're going to go to break, but before we go to break or before we go to lunch, we're going to do a quiz, and I'll tell them, like in a real class, I'll get my kids ready, right? So we're going to take a unit test and then I get them, they'll study. And at the last second, I'll say, okay, instead of 20 questions, it's just 4. And they're, wait, 4? I thought it was 20. No, it's just 4. Well, what are they? Questions 1 and 2. And they have to write 1 and 2 on one side of a note card and 3 and 4 on the other. 1 and 2 are, what are the 2 best things about me as a teacher? What are 2 things about me as a teacher that you really, really like? What are 2 things about me as a teacher that if you could press a button on me and change and take 2 things off of me and place them onto a teacher that you don't like, what would they be? That's questions 1 and 2. Questions 3 and 4. What are 2 things as a teacher that you don't like about me? What are 2 things as a teacher that if you could press a button and change any 2 things on me, what would they be and why? And, and of course, certain kids, we love you, Mr. Mandler. There's nothing we don't like. Good. I guess you'll get a 50% on the quiz, right? Mr. Mandler, we hate you. You're the worst teacher ever. Good. I guess you'll get a 50%. Because my whole thing with them was no matter how much you love someone in the world, there's always 2 things they can do to improve upon. And no matter how much you dislike someone in the world, I think there's always 2 things you can find that you like. But the thing is, like, they would do these and the feedback that I would get as a teacher. And so what I love about this is for questions 1 and 2, if you do this enough, you'll start to see themes start to emerge, right? So for me, for questions 1 and 2, they used to put that. They would put, we love how much you care. Like, you don't just want to know, like, what we did this weekend. You want to know who we were with and and they would write all that. And then for questions 3 and 4, sometimes too. So what I would do for questions 3 and 4 is I would line them all up and I would rip through them as fast as I could. So cause it's not fun to read all the things they don't like, but really what I'm looking for is a pattern. Like, do I see the same word? Homework. Like 21 kids wrote the word homework for question 3 and 4. Now I got to relook at that. Now I'm going to revisit. Is there something going on with my homework? Because that's too many kids. So everyone doesn't like something, right? But if that many say one thing, it gives me sort of that note. Now I know, okay, I got to take a look at this within myself. And it was really powerful.
Yeah. And the thing is too, even though you did that at a higher level, you can do that at an elementary school level.
Totally.
You can do little questionnaires, you can do whatever it is. And it might be different. It might not be as thorough, but you still get those underlying themes. I had done something like that in a classroom, and they had said how a lot of kids had said, and I had no idea this was a big thing, was like our cheers, we call them cheers, like call and response cheers. So you go like Tootsie Roll, Lollipop, we've been talking, now we stop. We'd learn like all of these different ones as a class, and we'd make actions together and whatever else. And I had no idea how much kids loved those, but you start to see like little themes. And like I said, for elementary, it's not the same extent as it is in high school, but you still see what they care about. Sometimes it's hugs. Sometimes it's high five. Sometimes it's that I dance, it's just, it depends on the class. The other thing that I wanted to say that I thought was really important is you had talked about how, you would sometimes just say, not today, not today. I can't do this. And sometimes I'll go in and I'll be like, oh, Miss Chyna's not feeling well. I need you guys to have a really, really awesome day for Miss Chyna because I'm just not feeling good or whatever. Because teachers, we know that teachers have a hard time taking a sick day. So even when we're rolling in sick, we still show up, right? But it was so cool because they would always just follow through with that, and they would do such an awesome job. But I think that's really powerful to do in a classroom, because I think sometimes what happens as teachers is we feel like we need to hold ourselves to this high standard where we always have our lives together, where we're always perfect in front of our students and we say all the right things. And I think it's very, very effective to be a real person and let them know that you have bad days. And sometimes you have a tough morning. And, we always, we talk about things a little bit lighter, but we'll talk about the size of problems, small, medium, large problems, all different sizes of problems. And one thing that I'll talk about, because I had a thing happen this last year where I had bought a donut. I had bought a donut before school, and everybody knows Miss Chyna's favorite food is a donut. And I dropped it on my way into the school.
Devastating.
And that was just heartbreaking for me.
What kind of donut, by the way? Let me guess. Let me guess. So I'm going to go white cream filled.
I like the white frosting with sprinkles. I don't care if it has cream or doesn't have cream, as long as it's not jelly.
Yeah, no. Right. Okay.
But I always need sprinkles on it. I love getting things with sprinkles. And that I shared that with my kids, it's kind of a bummer, but I think being real with students and letting them know that we have tough days and kind of how we cope is so important. I notice that so often that teachers will sometimes step out when they're having a tough time, which is okay if they need that to get themselves together, but it's also okay to have those tough moments in front of your kids, with your kids, kind of talking through it. Because I think it's so beneficial for them to see, especially for those kids that go home and when their mom or their dad is mad, they fly off the handle. They've never seen somebody that's been mad or upset not fly off the handle. So when they see that, it's nice to see what that reaction looks like too.
No doubt.
That's just important for teachers to remember, because I think it's so easy. We want to hold ourselves to the highest standard, which is great. But it's okay to also be a very real person. Kind of like it's also okay to have kids take those sort of assessments or quizzes where they evaluate you and have them write bad things. Yeah. That's good. It's okay to have things to improve on.
Yeah,
nobody's perfect. But I think as teachers, we tend to want to do things the right way all the time. And so it's kind of hard to realize we're not always doing it perfect.
Yeah. And I think, I think in life, sort of as a society, we've been taught to scream our strengths and whisper our struggles, right? We've kind of been taught that as a society. And I actually think it's better to do the opposite, right? I prefer to scream my struggles and whisper my strengths. And, it's interesting because there's times, where I'm about to give a presentation or something. This happened actually just the last couple of days. Last 3 days, I was in, did 3 different in-person seminars in Arkansas and in Illinois. And sometimes they try to read a bio before, when they're introducing me. And I hate that. It's so uncomfortable because I'm like, these people don't care about my bio. If I'm good today, they'll like me. If I'm not, I won't. That's, and the thing is, the bio's got a lot of good stuff. And, let's be clear, there's days I'm having crappy self-esteem and I'll sit on an airplane and read my bio and I'm like, shit, I'm good. Oh yeah, I forgot I did that. Oh yeah, I did that too, right? But like they don't care. I mean, people don't care. And I mean, you know how many times I sat through staff development as a teacher where, you know, they would read some person's bio and it was amazing, right? Like all these degrees and all these books, and then the person would go and I'd be like, well, those colleges were stupid. They gave that guy a degree. He was horrible, right? And like, you know, I think I agree with you. I think, you know, letting kids know where you struggle and not only letting them know where you struggle, but having them be a part of holding you accountable to your struggles. You know, I talk about openly about, you know, my homework, my sort of infamous Monday night homework assignment that I always had as a teacher when I taught middle school and high school, which was every Monday or every Tuesday, the kids had to come in and ask me how my recovery meeting went Monday night. That was it. They had no other job but to hold me accountable to making sure that I did what I needed to do. And, you know, sometimes when we can take the kid who's always being helped and get them to become the helper, right? You see this whole different change. I always say I got like the best weight loss program for teachers. So like they got all these weight loss programs. Here's all, it's simplest weight loss program. Anyone's trying to lose weight, just put a scale in your classroom. That's all you got to do. And every morning before you teach, you have to stand on it. And the kids get to weigh you in and they get to literally write on the board what your weight. I guarantee the night you eat, no matter how much you love donuts the night before, you can be like, I ain't eating that. Why? Because I got 26-year-olds weighing me in tomorrow. I'm not eating that. No way. And, you know, but this notion of, and I think, you know, the vulnerability and along with, and if it makes sense because look at what it does, right? Getting the help to become the helper fills that need for power and control and attention and all of those things that the kids are actually craving when they're misbehaving. You're giving them by getting them to help you. And so Tuesdays were my favorite day to teach. Literally, it was my favorite day because they would usually run to class and, you know, Mr. Mendler, you went last night, right? Yeah, I went. What'd you learn? Anything you could teach us? And there was never a time where I went to a meeting where I didn't learn at least one thing I could teach my students the next day. But see, what always happened was that always led to, you know, that next level of relationship building where a kid would come up to me privately sort of after and be like, yo, Mr. Mendler, can I talk to you real quick? Yeah, what's up? My grandma, man, like she's a mess. Do you think you could help her? Mr. Mendler, my mom, man, I've seen her use this or do that, you know, and like next thing you know, these kids are opening up in a way that they normally weren't opening up for other people. And, you know, and that was done because I was leading with my struggles. Here's my struggles. I'm going to put them on the table for you to see. But I think that's hard to do. Like, I think, you know, I don't think that's an easy thing because it takes confidence and, you know, but I think also what it does is it brings people closer to you. I mean, you know, I always see it like, I don't really need a teacher. I need an inspiration. Like as a kid, I needed an inspiration more than I needed a teacher. Inspire me, make me see why I want to be like you at some point in my life. And once I saw that, then you had me. And once you had me, you had a lot of other kids, right? Sort of like you get certain kids on your side and then they go out and get everybody else for you. That's really what classroom management is. You know, a lot of people think classroom management, sort of that term in general, means kids sit still and pay attention and do their work. You know, I don't agree with that. Like, I think classroom management is really about managing the only person that we have control over, which is ourselves, right? How well do I manage me at all times? When things get crazy around me, am I able to stay calm or do I get crazy with it? And if I get crazy with it, then my classroom management is blah. But if I can still stay calm and stay focused and kind of remember that it's a 180-day season and this is just one day and sort of kind of almost like in a sport where you're getting crushed one day. Like sometimes there's a blowout in a sport and, you know, and you got to just kind of finish the game out getting pounded, but also at the same time kind of figuring out what went wrong. Like why are we getting beat like this? You know, and then you make the adjustments and then you come back and boom, you know, you've kind of figured it out. And, you know, I think when we're able to do that, when we're willing to do that, you know, you just see a different level of connection with kids.
And I think the hard part with that is I think sometimes we look to blame rather than to reflect, right? So it's like, oh, those kids were having such a tough day today. That's why they had a terrible day. When in reality, I have been in a lot of classrooms where I walk in and I am instantly stressed, right? I'm like, wow, the tension is high in here. Hopefully I don't make too much noise. I might get called out. It's one of those things where I think it's hard to push teachers to be reflective in those situations, when in reality, it could drastically transform what's going on in their classroom.
No question.
Especially at an elementary standpoint, we always talk about, yeah, you might not want to spend 30 minutes on social emotional learning a day. You might not want to spend 30 minutes on classroom management a day. But guess what? If you don't, you're going to be spending 2 hours on it instead, because you haven't developed any sort of rapport. You haven't developed any relationship, classroom culture, or any management to help things stay in line,
Yeah, my mom, who was a teacher for a long time, she used to say that if everybody in the world stood around in a big circle and we all threw our problems into the middle of the ring, we'd all end up taking our own out, because we'd see everybody else's and we'd be like, oh, wait, like, I don't want that. Like, at least I've been dealing with mine, in my case, for 45 years. Just give me that back. And I think we often don't know what other people are going through. But once we do, and that goes the same with kids, right? It's always that what's pushing it, what's happening in their life. I like to, that thought process of, instead of getting mad at a kid, feeling sad for a kid, right? So sometimes I get mad at people in my life. When I get mad at people, my instinct is to react and respond and want to fight back. That's my instinct. When I feel sad for, my instinct is the complete opposite. I back off. Right? I mean, look at the difference right away, right? Mad at, I come toward you. Like, I'm coming at you. Sad for, I back off and I tiptoe around and I look at things from different perspectives, and I'm much more careful with the decisions I make. And, I like the Brian better, who comes out when I feel sad for a kid versus when I get mad at a kid, because, I feel like I'm able to control myself better. And usually, at the end of the day, when I realize what is going on with the kid, I am sad. Like you'll hear about the world or the life that the kid's coming from. And, while the behavior in the moment, it's easy for those behaviors to make us angry in the moment, generally later on, when you've kind of dissected and everyone's calmed down, you're like, man, I can't even comprehend going home to that world. Or I can't even comprehend, not having a Christmas, or not sure, I taught a girl, this girl who, lived in a group home, and her mother, every weekend, her mother would say she was going to come and never came. Like, she wouldn't come. She would say she was going to come, and the girl would get super excited and she would talk about it. My mom's going to come. And then she wouldn't come. And it was like, this was the roller coaster that this girl lived on, and I think most people, luckily in the world, I think most people don't understand what that's. I don't, right? I personally don't. Look, I got two good parents, right? I never had to worry about that, about, am I going to have a bed to sleep in, or am I going to be in a group home? Like, are my parents just going to be like, I don't feel like taking care of you anymore? Like, and literally that's the world that some of our kids are coming from. And, it's an incredible world. And it's, I don't know. That's why I love what you do. Like the concept of, of being there in the summer, and just, it's like, I'm your teacher always. Like, whether, whether it's the school year or whether it's after, I'm in your life now, and it's hard to get out of my life. And I think that's why you have often so much success with a lot of the kids. And I feel like that's why I did as well, because what I used to tell kids, once you come into my life, it's hard to get out of my life. It is like, I'm one of those crazy people who, now you're in my life, and and sometimes I would see behaviors start to escalate toward the end of the school year, or during, around break time, where, they weren't going to be with me for a little while. And, I remember, like, just looking at certain kids and then really focusing in their eyes and saying to them, listen, I'm not like everybody else. Like, whether you're in my class next year or not, whether you're in this school, whether you're in another school, whether you're at your grandma's in some other town, I'm going to find you. And I'm going to find out where you are, and I'm going to call, and I'm going to ask how you're doing. And, and I feel like when I would go to that length, sort of kids would look at me like, who is this dude? You know what I mean? And like, what, almost like, what's wrong with them? But I would always say, like, look, to reach people no one else reaches, you have to do things other people aren't willing to do. That's what it takes in anything in the world,
And I think sometimes they might look at you that way, but I think it is so powerful to them that they have somebody that cares about them that much, right? I had a kiddo this year who had a tough time, and had said something about how they were scared to be at home and whatever else. And I let them know. I said, you're in this grade now, but I said, you better believe when you go to middle school someday, I will still be here and you will have my phone number. And if there ever comes a time that you don't feel safe or you don't know what to do, Miss Chyna will always be in your corner. You can always, and it's like a wave of relief for these kids, right? Where they're calm and they're relaxed and they can just, understand that somebody's there. The other thing that I wanted to say before I forget.
Yeah. And then we got to wrap up.
Yep.
You and I could talk for like 5 hours. We've already been going for 2, or for 1. So
we're almost done here. But the whole, complaining, when we talk about complaining and putting everything in the pot, I think a really good mindset to have, and even something that I try to do, is that try to be a problem solver, right? So if you have a problem, if you're leaving work, because let's be honest, as a behavioral special education teacher, there are many days I leave that I'm like, whoa, what happened today? This happened, this happened, this happened. But train your mind that you can't talk about a problem or you can't complain about something without trying to think of a solution.
Absolutely.
And most of the time, the solution isn't, well, that kid should have done something different. Most of the time, it's something to do with your action or something else that could be implemented to be more successful, right? And I think that solution focus can really, really transform how you address anything in life, really.
Agreed. It's interesting to hear you say that, because that's like a whole other thing that I could get into right now. But that concept,
we didn't even get into behavior plans.
I know it happens. That's okay. That's okay. No, but that concept, right, of looking in the mirror, and we often don't look in the mirror unless someone holds the mirror up in our face. I mean, there's nothing that I hate more than being forced to watch myself present or watch myself speak or watch myself teach, because I'm my own worst critic and I pull myself apart in every direction. I mean, and I say it to teachers all the time, there's nothing better than watching yourself teach, because you'll destroy yourself. Like you'll never need an administrator to evaluate you again, because you'll be like, what, you're telling me that? Like, I saw that like a month ago. I was more looking at, the veins coming out of weird places in my forehead, and like how, like you said that day, my neck, I don't have a neck in this shirt. And like, right. And you just start criticizing yourself to a place where, but I think though, I think we often don't on our own look in the mirror, and we know we've talked about this in the past. Sometimes it takes somebody holding that up. And I talk about referral forms at schools, right? Like if you go to basically any school in this country, every school almost that you'll ever work in has a referral form, where you can quote unquote write a kid up, and so when I do a seminar, I always say to the teachers, do you guys have a referral form here? And they always say, yeah. And I always say, does it have a spot that says what the adult did wrong? No. Does it have a spot that says what the adult could do differently next time? No. Okay. Like, and so without that, and that's really, I know we have to wrap up soon, but that, in my opinion, is the biggest problem with most behavior plans, right? When you look at most behavior plans and most behavior systems, they all focus on changing the kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thought process is change the kid. We use consequences, and we use tickets, and we use rewards, and we use, all the stuff that we use focuses externally. And I want to be clear, like, I don't think the teacher is usually the problem. I don't think that, but I also think that at the same time, we're the only ones that we can change. Like, I can't change a kid. I can only change me. And the concept has to be that I'm going to change me to change everything around me. And once I start internally focusing on what I can do differently, you often find like this whole new, it's almost like you have this closet of clothes. And now when you start, which is the external stuff, right? The tickets, the stickers, the consequences. But now you start looking internally, it's like someone dropped a whole new closet off. And the thing is, though, they didn't take the old closet away. Like, your old closet is still there. You can still go to that, but now you can mix and match, and next thing you know, you're doing things that you actually have control over. And, I think that is incredibly powerful. And even if the teacher is the problem, I always say to teachers, you have to admit that the adults are problem some of the time, right? Like, not most of the time.
100%.
there are some adults in education that are good at pouring gasoline on a little tiny fire, right? There was a fire this big and they walked over with a whole can of gasoline and you know what I mean? And then they're just like, I don't understand why there was an explosion, you know? And so how we respond to a kid, you know, Mr. Manley, this lesson sucks. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. Versus Mr. Manley, this lesson sucks. Whoa, 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 time out. I hear you. I hear you. And you know what? I'm not saying that it's always great. And I'm not saying that every lesson is tremendous and dynamic and amazing. And you know what? You got me. But listen, hold up. Just like I would never yell from across the room that some of your reading skills are a disaster, which by the way, some of them are. And I would never yell that some of your math skills are a nightmare, which some of them are. I would never yell. Why wouldn't you yell that, Mr. Manley? Because that would be embarrassing to you. And my goal is never to embarrass you. Like what you could have done instead is you could have walked up to me privately and you could have kind of gotten in my ear and said, Mr. Manley, man, admit it. You thought there was going to be a snow day today, didn't you? Like, there's no way you planned for our class. You know, you seriously. And like, you know, and then, so look at the difference, right? In both scenarios, the kid still yelled from across the room, this lesson sucks, right? I didn't stop that in either scenario. But in scenario one, no, it doesn't. Yes, it does. That's the gasoline, right? Versus this lesson sucks. Let me pour water. Let me pour water. And the way to pour water is to just roll with it. It's to, you know, almost to agree. You know, agree, Mr. Manley, you're so stupid. Obviously, buddy. Like I picked this profession for like 40 grand a year to be yelled at by you all day. Tell me how stupid I am because I wasn't sure I knew it on my own. Like what more does a kid have back to say versus you're so stupid. No, I'm not. Right. And next thing you know, you're in a battle with a kid. I'll give you the last word and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with everything that you said. I think it's just one of those things that, you know, as a special ed teacher, we are constantly reevaluating ourselves. And I hope that other teachers that are out there, if you ever have a teacher that says, hey, have you suggested this? Or, hey, have you tried this? That it's nothing against you, that it's only trying to help better that student. Totally. And if you are one of the teachers that has never recorded yourself teach, I encourage you to do that this next year because it is game changing. I do it at least once a year and I just kind of watch, you know, how is the overall management of even with paras and students and what can I change to make my like lessons run more fluidly? It's really beneficial.
No question. There's nothing better. There's actually, in my opinion, there's nothing better at improvement than sitting down. I mean, I hate it. Like I do it for this. So the audio feed comes out on Mondays for this. So I go through and I listen to our whole show and there's nothing that makes me more anxious than right before I'm about to hit play. Cause I'm like, I don't want to hear myself. I don't like how my voice sounds. And why do, you know I was spitting when I talked and like, I'm just always thinking of all the things that go, but it's good at the end of the day though. There's nothing better. Like when I get through it, I'm like, I'm so glad I did that because you know, I'll learn things about myself or sometimes I'll listen to myself and I'll cringe and I'll say, no, you shouldn't have said it like that. You got to improve. And, or sometimes I'm like, that was a brilliant point. Like you're so good, but like both directions is what you get anyway. Yeah. All right. We good?
Yep. I'd say next time we'll plan to talk behavior plans and all that jazz. This was a good conversation.
It was good. Yeah. Like I got to shout out to people because so this week I had an awesome week. I was in person again. I mean, it's starting to open up. Things are starting to open up like crazy, which I mean, in a lot of other places. I'm in New York, so we're still a little bit, I don't know what's up with us, but we're a little bit slower, so to speak. But I was in Illinois, rural Illinois, and the land of the pretzels. So these guys, they're the Freeport Pretzels. That's their name, the Freeport Pretzels, which is, I think, the best name in education. There's no better name than the Pretzels. So shout out to them. And then shout out to everyone in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I had an amazing 2 days with them. They were awesome. These people are great. There's nothing better than coming and seeing everybody. So we won't be here next week on Thursday because I'm moving. So the next time I will see you, I will be in my new home in Florida. So I know I'm excited for that. So it was good seeing you. We'll be back same time in 2 weeks, right?
2 weeks. Yeah.
Right. So then we'll say, peace. We're out of here. Later, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for joining. Bye.